Hello, I'm Earl Wilson. In this segment, we're going to talk about the process of staying on course. That is, how do you finish well? How do you keep moving forward? Maybe after you've gotten through a period of therapy, you've got utilized accountability groups until most of that input is kind of entrenched in you. You still meet with someone to keep tabs on you and to encourage you, but it's still a day-by-day process. When I thought about the question, how long is this going to take, that my clients used to so often ask me, I realized that even though the standard answer is 3 to 5 years, that's 3 to 5 years of therapy, the real answer to the question is it's going to take a lifetime, because a lifetime of sexual sobriety requires a lifetime of commitment to the process and a lifetime of moving forward. When I refer to myself sometimes as a recovered sexual addict, what I'm saying is that I'm still on a process that will keep me clean and will keep me pure if I stay on that process. So I want to share with you some of the things today that have been important to me in going through that. Early on, you experienced help in developing external restraints. People do things like put filters on their computer, and they develop rules for themselves not to watch television unless someone's there, not to go to use live porn anywhere, stay away from women where there's attractions and so forth. Those external restraints serve you well, but they won't serve you for a lifetime. They need to be in place for a lifetime, but they won't do the job, because the real job has to do with developing internal restraints. And the main one for me is to tell myself continually for 26 years, that's no longer an option for me. In other words, I have ruled out certain things, and it helps to have made that decision. That way when temptation comes, I can say to myself, that's not an option for me, so quit thinking about it. Move on, get away, move away from it. And that has been a great help to me as far as staying on course. Another thing that's been extremely helpful is to get rid of secrets. I mentioned earlier that I had to get away from having lived a secret life for 10 years and get to where my life was much more open. And a part of that is agreement to tell my wife what's going on and to actually share. And this has been difficult at times, because there's times if I was having a rough day, maybe experiencing some sexual temptation or whatever, she wouldn't want to hear it. But she has heard it, and I have sometimes told her, I have something to tell you. Do you want me to tell you? And there have been a couple of times when she said, no, I'll be happy if you just talk to Larry about it. And so when I would meet with Larry, I would tell him the story, and he would give me some help. And then I would report to her that Larry and I discussed this, and I think he was very useful to me in this process. So maintaining accountability and maintaining the truth, and letting the people closest to you know about what you're going through is important. I remember walking through a mall with Sandy, a shopping mall, and she said, wow, did you see that beautiful woman? And I said, kind of sheepishly, I think, you mean the one in the black dress? And she said, yes, wasn't she gorgeous? And I said, yeah. And then she said, oh, did I cause you temptation by saying that? And I said, no, but are you interested in knowing what I did with that? And she says, I'm very interested in knowing what you did with that. And we kind of stopped and looked at each other, and I said, well, I told myself, Sandy's right, that's a beautiful woman, but she's none of my business. And I said, that's what I do most of the time, because you can't go through life without seeing, people of all different sizes and shapes, and women who are beautiful and so forth. But I said, I have come to a place where I don't want to be entertained by beautiful women other than you. And she said, thank you for that. That helps a lot. And so having that kind of honesty and openness with her has really helped me to stay on course, and that's been important. Another aspect that's probably the most difficult is keeping the disciplines, because there's certain things that are helpful. It's helpful for me to think. It's helpful for me to write. And it's helpful for me to stay in touch with God on a daily basis. What I discovered as I went through the process and actually spent time trying to learn to get back in touch with God, I discovered how fried my brain was. I had spent so much time living in fantasy and chasing ideas and thinking about various situations that it was really hard for me to pray, really hard for me to read Scripture. Sometimes I couldn't even read a paragraph without an intruding thought coming along. So the importance of doing that, and I had to learn, okay, what works for me. People would tell me, well, you just got to get back to where you pray more. Well, how do you do that when you can't concentrate? Well, for me, I found that walking and talking with the Lord helped me, because trying to sit quietly wasn't working. So walking and talking, going through different places that were peaceful for me, like walking down a path through the woods or whatever, that was all part of it. But I also had to learn to sit in a chair, stay there, and listen. Don't move. Don't think of everything you need to do, from see how the football game's going to see what's in the refrigerator. Stay there and concentrate. I remember the time in the second year of my therapy when Paul said to the group, he said, I'd anticipated that Earl's involvement with us might end at this time, but I have been impressed with something I think he needs, and I want to run it by you. He's going to be serving a suspension from the Board of Psychologists Examiners for this next year, and I suggest that he not even look for work, and he not work, and that he spend the year learning to be alone with God and learning to serve his family. How do you think I felt at that moment? I was terrified. And then I was angry. And I just kept saying, trying to come to my own defense. And finally I blurted out, how do you expect me to support my family? And he shrugged. He shrugged like he didn't care. And then he said something that Christian financial planners would never approve of. He said, you should just put it on your credit card if you have to. Because when you go back to work, you make good money, but this is too important to ignore. The most amazing thing about that was I desperately looked around the room, looked towards my wife, and her head was nodding as well. And I thought to myself, woman, you must be crazy. This is your life too, So I finally got to sleep that night. The next morning, she said, how are you doing? And I said, not very well. I'm going for a walk. So I went for a walk, and I kicked rocks, and I batted leaves off trees. And when I got back, she said, well? And I said, well, I'm going to do what they said. But I said, it's very frightening. And I don't know. I hope we get through this. And we both realized that we were trusting God, that this is, but one of the things that I realized, that even during the times when she didn't have love feelings for me, she was extremely aware of the need for me to get back in the right relationship with God. And that was her motivating factor in going along with things like this. So I've been especially blessed by having a wife who is committed to my well-being, and knowing that my well-being rests with God, not with my own ingenuity, not even with her and I together. It starts and ends with Him, and all the other is an exercise in His blessing. So staying on track requires that you stick with the disciplines, that you remember who you are. And I'm going to talk later about that in detail, but for me, to get through recovery meant that I had to remember who I was. And first and foremost, I'm a child of God. And I hadn't been acting like one. So part of my recovery during that time and since has been to constantly remember who I am and realize that I'm a child of God and I have the privilege of acting like one. So let's get on with it.